there's so many experiences in our life where we resist the thing that's going to set us free because it's a little uncomfortable for a minute. Why are you letting some arbitrary boundary keep you enslaved when if you just take a little step that makes everybody uncomfortable for a minute and then suddenly everybody's free and your kids feel loved and you don't have that generational baggage on you anymore?
Welcome to Permission Slips, a space for you to practice paying attention to your life with self-compassion and kindness, so you can experience the wholeness, purpose, and joy you were made for. I'm Jillian DeBritz, a life and leadership coach and a recovering perfectionist, learning alongside you how to give myself permission to be human. I am so glad that you're here with me today for this conversation with today's guest, Mandy Arioto. Mandy is the CEO and president of the MomCo, which is a global organization for moms that she'll talk more about. And I just want to share her bio really quick so Mandy people can know who you really are. She is widely known for her unique takes on evangelism, parenting, and cultural issues. Through MomCo, which every year mobilizes millions of women and partners with tens of thousands of churches, Mandy serves as the voice of one of the most influential outreach organizations in the U.S. and around the world. She's the author of 3 books, the most recent being Have More Fun: How to Be Remarkable, Stop Feeling Stuck, and Start Enjoying Life. An avid rock climber, Mandy and her husband, Joe, live in Denver, Colorado with their 3 kids. Mandy, welcome to Permission Slips.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. Mandy and I connected several months ago at a MomCo dinner where I was able to meet her through my friend Michelle, who serves with you on the MomCo National Board. And it's just been so fun to hear from her about you and your unique leadership style over the past year that she's served alongside you. And one of the things that I have heard her say over and over and over again, and I know I'm not throwing her under the bus because she would be completely fine with me sharing this, is how you are completely and authentically yourself wherever you lead, which I don't know if there's any higher compliment
Yeah,
as a
that's
leader.
huge. That's huge.
Can you talk about, well, just your leadership role, what you do with the MomCo at this point, and then maybe kind of take us back to your journey that brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the privilege of being the CEO of the MomCo. We work in 112 countries, 30 different languages, and I've been in this role for a decade now, for 10 years. And what we do is we just gather moms and resource them to be the best moms that they can be, to talk about faith and marriage and all the things that are really sensitive and close to our hearts. And so we really value honest conversation and creating places where women can feel seen and known.
Yeah.
Before I joined the MomCo, I was working at a church in Southern California on the teaching team. And then before that, I was an entrepreneur. And so I've had this very eclectic career. But the interesting thing is when I got invited to MomCo, my kids were little and a friend invited me and I was like, mom groups aren't really my thing. But I trusted my friend and I showed up and it became the safest place in the world. And about a year later, MomCo reached out to me and said, hey, will you come out and join our staff? And I turned them down and I said no. And then that night I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt that I heard God say to me, you need to go and you need to go now. And so 9 days later, my husband and I were driving out in a U-Haul. We didn't have a place to live. We didn't know any plans. Like, we were not prepared, but we knew God asked us to go. And so he's like calling rental properties on our way out. But it was the best decision that we didn't know that we were going to make. It kind of just set us up for this grand adventure that we've been on.
Okay, can I just say 9 days? When you heard the Lord say, now, you took that very literally. That is not
Yeah.
a quick turnaround.
Yeah, it was, and it didn't make any sense. Our family, our
Yeah.
community, our friends, and that's the cool part about my husband too. And he's like, yeah, okay, let's do this
Hmm.
without a lot
Hmm.
of conversation needing to happen around it.
Yeah. And I remember having a conversation about this when we met at the MomCo dinner we were at together, where I said, okay, hold on. So is this a normal dynamic for you and Joe together? For him to hear you say, I feel like the Lord is saying this. And for people, I'm just even naming the fact that not everyone listening to this podcast has a faith of their own and might be hearing this and
Yeah.
thinking, what in the world are these women talking about? But for you to say to your husband, I'm pretty sure I heard God in the middle of the night say, we need to go now. And for him to respond to you with, all right, let's go.
Hmm.
To me, that is a pretty extraordinary and even abnormal amount of faith in the best way, right? Like that's not a normal response. So can you talk about what led you to be at a place where you can confidently say, yeah, this was God. I heard God tell me that we need to go. How did you know that was him?
Yeah, and I mean, it can look different for everyone.
Hmm.
Whether you call it intuition, whether you call it, I don't know, however you want to define what that is. I just I think that there have been times, and I think we can all probably relate to this, where you just know that
Hmm.
you know that you
Hmm.
know. And my whole life, I have been a seeker of wanting to know what is true and what is real. And when I was in high school, I was working at Perkins Family Restaurant. It was like my first real job that I paid
Hmm.
taxes for, right? And I was a server. And the thing about Perkins at that time was if you wanted to make the real money, you had to work in the smoking section. And so my shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. So I'm 17 years old working at Perkins. And I'm like, when I told my parents, like, hey, this is a job, they're like, that sounds fantastic, which makes me laugh. And it's so on brand for my parents. But at 17 years old, I was working the night shift in the smoking section. Anyways, I had this coworker and she was a good friend of mine. And I finished my shift one morning, went home, went to sleep. And in the middle of the night or the middle of the morning when I was sleeping, I had a dream. And it was just this random dream about a conversation that I had with her where she told me that she was pregnant. And woke up and I was like, huh, that was super weird. And so I go to my shift that night. And in the middle of the shift, she pulls me aside to the same place that we were in my dream and tells me the exact same conversation that I had dreamt about that morning. And so in my dream, I knew what I was supposed to say to her after
Mm.
that, after she told me. And I just feel like when we are available and open ourselves up and we are seeking and want to hear what is true and we want to be in touch with the greater things of the universe, I believe that's God, that becomes real for us. And I think
Yeah.
when we act on it, the more it happens. And so it's
Yeah.
being faithful to act, whether it's our intuition or we feel like God's speaking to us, to act immediately. And the more we act, the more things start coming toward us.
Yeah. I love that. It's like, what are we paying attention to and what are we expecting the outcome to be?
Hmm.
So as you're looking, you're seeking, and you're open to the voice of God in your life. And like you said, others may call that intuition. And I believe right along with you that God uses all of it, right? Whatever we want to label it, if we're looking and believing that there is goodness, that God is drawing us, that he is active and at work and trustworthy even, which those beliefs are pretty big statements to believe that God is good and trustworthy and active. But if we choose, maybe that's what faith is, choosing to believe that those things could be possible. And we're looking actively for opportunities to pursue or to experience that goodness for ourselves, that we're going to find it, right? We're going to find the voice of God. We're going to find the direction that he has for our life. We're going to find his presence already at work, already pursuing us, already loving us. So it really is about paying attention. What are we paying attention to?
Yeah. Have you ever had those moments like where your
Mm-hmm.
intuition or you knew for a fact, like, okay, I need to
Mm-hmm.
make a move here?
Yeah. I've never had a dream. I've never like that. I have friends who have had dreams where just like you described, they're like, this is what happened. And I know this is God and I know he's telling me to move forward. And that's never how I um, have experienced the voice of God. But for me, there have been really sweet, intimate moments where often for me, it sounds like my own voice in my head where I'm asking God questions and desperately seeking direction. And often the voice, which sounds very similar to my own voice, is much kinder and much more loving and more gentle than I ever am to myself.
Hmm.
And so over time, I've learned to notice, like, that's not how I talk to myself. And yet that's also consistent with what I believe the character of God is like. And so paying attention, like you said, paying attention and noticing that voice again and again has sort of trained my ear
Yeah.
to recognize it more quickly. Yeah, but I think about for you that shift, you had already been doing a lot of work in your life that had prepared you to step into a new role. You'd already been leading, you'd already been teaching. Will you talk a little bit before we jump into the MomCo more um, specifically about what was it like for you as you're a woman leader in Southern California teaching at a church? How did you have opportunities as a female in that context to be able to teach?
It is a delicate topic, and
Mm-hmm.
especially in some spaces where women aren't normally given those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
opportunities.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, well, I would say two things. One, I feel like the men in my life were continually being like, hey, you take this one, right? When I
Mm,
didn't have the confidence, or when there were opportunities that could have easily have gone to people who were way more talented than I was, they were continually giving me a chance to
mm-hmm.
step up and to try and to fail. And so I just feel like I have continually been surrounded by people who were so gracious as leaders themselves to give people who are coming up who weren't as talented, who didn't have the skill, to give it, to have some shots at it. And they would teach me and give me feedback. And so I was
Mm,
just really fortunate to be surrounded by incredible communicators, incredible leaders who really modeled to me what it looks like to raise up other people and
yeah,
younger people. And so that's just a real gift,
that's
I would say.
amazing.
And secondly, I went through seasons where I was a stay-at-home mom, and then seasons where I was a working mom. Stay-at-home mom is a working mom. But I would say that every single thing that I did or tried or little skill I picked up, like, God wastes nothing. And here we go back with the God conversation. But I think whatever we give our energy to over the course of our lives, all of those things kind of snowball and accumulate. And at any given time, we have the skills we need for that moment. And so it's like this cumulative effect where I'm like, oh my gosh, when I was doing this 15 years ago, I'm using that skill right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of fun to see.
How have you seen that progression of your skills developing as you've moved through the last 10 years of leadership? What are some of the skills that you've gained over the course of the last decade?
That's a good question. I would say I'm much more comfortable having conversations that, 20 years ago would have made me sweat for 2 days about bringing up
Mm-hmm.
certain things. I've recognized that there are some things that just take time. My leadership style is like, I want to do it and I want to do it now and I don't want to wait and I want to like get this moving. And with the perspective I have now, I recognize, oh, there are some things that are going to take 10 years. As much as
Mm,
I want that to not be the case, like, there's some things you can only gain with time. There are some
mm-hmm.
relationships that just need time to be built.
Yeah,
I've learned the value of really seeing people and honoring their gifts and treating them in ways that I am always presenting them with good opportunities, with new opportunities to take on different roles, to stretch them, to give them things that are outside of their comfort zone,
that's
so that
beautiful.
when they leave, like, the interaction that we have with each other, that they're like, oh, that was some of the best
Yeah.
moments of my life when I was working there.
I love that. Well, and I think that's the beauty of what powerful leadership does is that we see and call out the goodness and strengths of the people around us and give them opportunities to shine and to thrive. And so I hear you saying, yeah, I'm developing the people around me, and that's something that's taken some time to learn that skill. I'm so curious about, like, okay, so you moved to Colorado, sight unseen, 9 days after kind of getting that message from the Lord. What was it like to transition from, okay, no, I don't want to work for this company. I don't want to work for the MomCo, or I guess it was Mops International at that
Mhm.
point before the rebrand, to like, okay, I guess I want to be here and I want to stay and I want to invest. What was the heart shift like for you in that process?
Yeah, when I knew that this is where we were supposed to be, it was like an all in. That's kind of how I am. It's like, okay, this is where we're going to be. This is what we're committing to for this season, and I'm going hard. And so there was excitement. There was just this recognition of the potential. And I feel so passionate about women and women leaders and moms and the power of moms. And so I was just, I mean, I think for the first year I was running on adrenaline, just so pumped to get to drive into work every day and to get to do the things that I was presented with. So
Mm,
it was kind of just like this shift, like, okay, here we go. And we're
yeah.
hitting the ground running.
Yeah. What makes you so passionate about women and leadership and specifically moms? What do you love about supporting them?
So, without a doubt, I've gotten to do a lot of fun things throughout my life, but the thing that I care most about, the most rewarding thing, is being a mom. And it's so transformative across the board, from your body to how you view your role in the world to your legacy. And so I just think motherhood is this underrated, transformative life experience that we kind of just take for granted. And not only that, I just see the power of moms every day. I mean, moms control 85% of household purchases. What we forget is that moms control the entire financial market, if we're being honest. Like,
Totally.
our spending power is more than France, Italy, and Canada's GDP. So, and yet nobody talks about it, and nobody really gives it as much credit
Is that
as
true, that statistic? That's
absolutely.
fascinating.
And the UN says if you want to raise a community out of poverty, the single best way to do that is to resource the moms. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I mean, I could tell you stat after stat after stat of how moms are shaping the world and communities and their homes in unrecognized ways. And that's
Yeah.
what I think the power is we do all this work. We do all this like intentional planning. We form how our kids are growing and the trajectory of really communities, and it's all really unseen and unacknowledged. And I think there's a lot of power there.
Okay, let's talk about that because in so many ways, being unseen, unacknowledged, feeling invisible, whether that's in individual relationships or in a family structure or in larger culture, that's really painful. It's really one of my greatest pain points is feeling invisible in different places of my life. What do we do with that as moms? What's the impact of feeling that unseen experience for moms? And how do we, or maybe how do you as a leader hope to draw that work into a greater visibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. You might have a better answer for it than I do. I think sometimes what I see is a lot of us live in stories that are untrue. And one of those is that we're unseen. Because the truth is, we are seen by our kids, who what we do is their whole life. Like their
Yeah.
entire life is what we do.
Hmm.
We're seen by our neighbors. We're seen by the person at the grocery store who checks us out. We're seen by our fellow drivers. And so I think sometimes we think being seen means you have to have, 1 million followers and be doing public work. And actually, I don't think that is being seen at all. Those people don't know you. They see like this much of you, and that's like a fake version of you.
Hmm.
And so I call it like the 20 likes conundrum, where if you post something on social media and you get 20 likes, you're like, that was a huge failure. That's so embarrassing. Like, maybe I should take that post down. But if 20 people came up to you in real life and were like, that is such a great outfit. Oh my gosh, I love that. You would be like, this was the best day ever. My life has
Right.
changed. I'm wearing this outfit every single day. And so I think sometimes it's like reframing for ourselves that our life, our worlds, is actually really profound, and we're shaping a lot of things, even though if our metrics are a little off, when we recalibrate those, I think we've
Hmm.
gained so much life back.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're pushing back on the impact of being seen or what it actually means to be seen, because you're right. There are witnesses to our life, our kids, our neighbors. And, like on a spiritual level, we're seen by God.
Hmm.
For those of us who that matters to our spiritual journey to know that if no one else sees and values what we're doing, that the God who made us sees us and values and honors this unseen hidden work. And that for me, that was such a hugely formative part of motherhood and I'm still a mom. My kids are in middle school now, but that season, I spent just over a decade as a full-time stay-at-home mom. It was like stripping away all of these parts of my identity that I thought were who I was based on how others experienced me, the affirmation that they gave me, that, it wasn't necessarily likes at that point in my life on Instagram, but it was, I wanted to have a public impact outside of my home where people saw that I was competent and had skills, had, leadership potential, had value to offer in a way that others saw and validated. And so maybe when I'm thinking about being seen or unseen, it's more about like the validation or the feedback that we're getting from other people. And moms don't really get a ton of feedback or thanks for the work that they're doing. So when you think about what you're trying to do through your work with the MomCo, what does this organization do to help moms in those unseen hidden places?
Yeah, I think, part of what we do is bringing moms together. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the most powerful things is when you sit down with a handful of other moms and they're like, oh my gosh, me too, right? Those are some of
Yeah.
the most powerful words that we can share with each other. It's like, oh yeah, that I'm totally
Yeah.
experiencing the same thing when we think
Yeah.
we're the only ones. That to me is the power of what we do. It's just bringing women together in small groups and seeing each other and sharing our stories and talking about the things that we're embarrassed to say out loud. And
Yeah.
then suddenly everyone else looks around and is like, oh, yeah, you're fine in our family too.
I love
So,
that theme that we talked about before we started recording for the year, this year in MomCo was make it awkward, right?
mhm.
Can you talk about like why make it awkward? What's the value of making things awkward?
Yeah, it's like the least valuable, like, I don't know, hype theme ever because it's so uncomfortable. But it really came from a story of when I was growing up. I grew up with a dad who was a great guy. He was hardworking and reliable, but he never once told me he loved me. When I was in college, I had like mustered up the courage to have a conversation with him about it. And right before I was able to have a conversation with him, he passed away unexpectedly. He went out for a run and had a heart attack and died. And a few weeks after his memorial service, I was talking with my mom and I asked her, I was like, hey, do you know my dad never told us that he loved us, us kids, my brother and I? And she was like, it's because his dad never told him he loved him. And so he felt like it was awkward. And then as more time went by, it was even more awkward. And I thought about that and I was like, you know what? The first time my dad would have told me that he loved me, it would have been super awkward. And the second time he told me he loved me, it would have been awkward. And then the third time, he would have just been a dad who tells his kid he loves her.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think there's so many experiences in our life where we resist the thing that's going to set us free because
Mm.
it's a little uncomfortable for a minute. Or we're like, oh, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. Well, why? Why are you letting some arbitrary boundary keep you enslaved when if you just take a little step that makes everybody uncomfortable for a minute and then suddenly everybody's free and your kids feel loved and you don't have that generational baggage on you anymore. And so that's really the heart behind Make It Awkward is do that thing that feels uncomfortable, whether it's like initiating sex with your partner or whatever it is. You know how sometimes it gets weird and you're like, ugh, and it feels weird for a second to initiate. It's like all those things that are built into life when we just go for it, suddenly the power over it is completely gone.
Yeah. Well, and I think about how the more and more we practice doing things that feel awkward, that feel uncomfortable, it's like we strengthen our tolerance for the discomfort or anxiety that comes with not knowing how things are going to turn out or not knowing how it's going to feel. But the more we do that and survive, the more courage we're going to have the next time to know I can be brave, I can be vulnerable, and I'm going to be okay. And not only okay, but maybe I'll actually feel more connected to the people that I'm sharing with or that I'm initiating with or pursuing because of that vulnerability.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I read a
Yeah.
study recently and it was about what forms deep friendship. And the second determiner of like how you can build bonds with someone quickly is to experience an awkward moment together. And I just love that so much. It's like accelerates friendship by
Yeah.
a multitude of years when you have like a weird experience. And I was like, that's so great that
Oh my
we just have to
gosh.
get a little uncomfortable and it accelerates our friendship that much
Right.
faster.
Which isn't that counterintuitive? It's like all of us want to avoid those
Yeah.
awkward experiences. Like we do everything we can to not embarrass ourselves.
Like, I think about all the experiences in my life. Like, I remember one time I walked out of the bathroom and like my dress was tucked up into my undies, and this lady like was like, "Oh my gosh," and like helped me. And then the rest of the night we were like in it
Mm-hmm.
together, right? Because of that one silly thing. And then
Totally.
it was like a wedding weekend. And so all wedding weekend we were now friends. So it's just
Hmm.
like it just takes a little bit of vulnerability, and
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
so much potential.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about, again, the thing that saved my life as a mom when I felt so alone, so crazy. Constantly was judging myself for feeling like a failure. You know, it's that recovering perfectionist. I had these expectations of what it meant to be a good mom, wherever that came from. And and I was constantly letting myself down. And so to have women who yeah, it was really awkward the first time we gathered together in one of our living rooms with our kids playing, to the side, eating their goldfish and interrupting every 5 minutes. But I remember one mom, it was probably me first, but we all took turns with just snot running down our face, and crying those tears. It's not polite tears anymore. It's like, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And I don't know if I'm going to be okay. And to have a group of other women in that awkward moment of vulnerability stay in the room and not run away with judgy looks on their faces or like, you're too much for me, but to have that felt embodied experience of people staying and leaning in, it healed that fear of being too much. It healed that fear of, oh, there's something wrong with me. And I just love that invitation for moms to make it awkward. If we can just normalize awkwardly sharing about what we feel awkward about, we're all just allowed to be human, right?
Totally. And I think it's so interesting that we all have the same like
Mm-hmm.
underlying things, and we're all
Mm-hmm.
thinking the same things. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's so freeing to just be
Yeah.
honest about it.
Yeah. Well, I love your honesty and how you approach your writing and your leadership as you speak in different facilities, different contexts. But you just started a new podcast and it's called The Mandy Show. Can you talk about what this space is, what you're hoping to create with this new show?
Yeah, it's really a place where we talk about all of the conversations that happen in secret, I feel like. So, what I know about women in particular, and this is for everybody, but women in particular, I know that there are secret sideline conversations happening at soccer games and in the carpool line. And it's like this secret society of women where we talk about what's going on with you, like whatever the conversation is. And so, this is really a platform to have those secret conversations in the open and to talk about things that we all wonder about. And we're like, is anyone going to address this? So it's really just a place where we have fun. We talk about deep things. We talk about all sorts of weird things too. Like I'm really interested in interesting theological conversations. And so
Mm-hmm.
we span all sorts of topics and nothing is off limits.
Well, and it's interesting too that you've had you're talking about like the sideline conversations women have at soccer games or whatever. The guests, I've seen several of your guests are men.
Hmm.
And so I'm curious, who's your audience? Is this for women only or are you hoping to reach men and women?
Yeah, it's really for men and women.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our guests, so we had Joshua Broom on recently, and he's a former porn star. And so I think for many of us women, what I know in working with the millions of women that we do is that porn is a conversation that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but is happening in, if we look at percentages, 80% of homes. And so I just want to talk about it, right? Everybody's like, is what's normal, what's not, what's okay. And so Joshua has this really incredible perspective, having come out of the porn industry and has a relationship with God. And so um, I just loved getting to have that conversation with him and talk honestly about the impact of porn in our homes and in our personal lives and in our relationships. And so, yeah, that
Hmm.
was a really fun conversation.
You are not afraid to push the envelope. Like there really feels like there's nothing off limits for you in terms of the things you're willing to talk about, the places you're willing to go. And I imagine that not everyone likes that because you probably are making some people uncomfortable, right? With the conversations you want to have. Have you gotten pushback either in this show or in other areas where you've kind of tried to push people's comfort zones?
I think that comes with, that's like the mantle of leadership, right? I get feedback on what I wear, on how I style my hair, on I mean, you name it, and I get feedback on it. People make a lot of assumptions about because I'm willing to talk about things that, oh, she must be this or this. And usually it's wildly inaccurate. But I just think that we live in a culture where we have lost the ability to have conversation with people we disagree with or who think differently than we do. And as a person of faith, that even gets, more judgment around it. I'm a follower of Jesus. When Jesus walked the earth, he interacted with all sorts of people and had meaningful conversations with all sorts of people about a wide variety of topics. And I think we understand each other better. We move forward faster. We live in a world that is loving and where we get to be good neighbors when we're willing to be like, yeah, we totally disagree about that, but we're still friends and we can still talk about it without it getting heated or weird. And so I just
Yeah.
really believe in the power of conversation and the power of being a human being talking to another human being.
Mhm.
And we don't have to agree on everything.
I love that. And I love as you model the vulnerability of having conversations about things that are very human, very like we're not talking about intellectual, abstract concepts of theology or politics. You're talking about like universal human experiences, right? And fears. And you're bringing it really close to home to people's hearts by tapping into areas where a lot of people would be too afraid to go. And so I think you breed that sense of connection already just by being willing to delve into those off limits places.
Yeah. You feel like the kind of person too who is like in the room and you're going to be like, well, what about this kind of thing?
Listen,
Yeah.
everyone. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think part of my training as a coach, but just how I'm wired anyway, is through questions and curiosity. I really love to build connections by seeking to understand people and listen more than I speak. And so that's been really helpful for me. And it's almost a filter when I find myself like kind of burning on the inside, like, oh, I just need to say this thing. It's almost like a check for me of maybe I actually need to take a breath and get curious about not only what's going on inside me in this interaction, like, how can I seek to understand the other person a little bit more? Like, what's underneath that for them? Like, why is this so important for them? So I think questions have been really, really helpful. That when I'm curious and when people feel like you're genuinely interested, they feel safe. And like, there's a difference between curiosity of like, well, explain this to me, explain why you think this or whatever, and like, tell me more. Tell me more about that with a sense of compassion and care for the person. Yeah, I love that you keep asking me these questions. You're making me think really deeply. And I'm thinking about leadership in general and the feedback you mentioned. That was such a kind way to say people have feedback, people have opinions about everything I do. What do you do when feedback is hard? And or when it lands hard, because there could be feedback that is maybe negative. Maybe someone has a strong opinion about something you shouldn't be doing or you should be doing that you don't want to. And it doesn't always affect you, right? Like if you have a good reason for something, a decision you've made and someone disagrees, whatever. But sometimes that hard feedback or criticism can penetrate deep. So I'm curious whether you have a specific example or is a more general thought about how would you encourage leaders or what have you learned about the hard feedback that you're going to get in leadership and how to respond to that in a way that feels healthy?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of leadership is navigating people's opinions of how you're doing, how you're navigating things, what you think. And I would say I definitely go through different seasons where I navigate feedback differently.
Mm-hmm.
But what it boils down to for me is a lot of times feedback is more reflective of the person than it is of me.
Mm,
Second, I have a group of trusted people who, when they give me feedback or go to them and say, hey, I got this feedback. Can you help me navigate this? That I really trust. And then there's feedback that I get from outside masses where I'm like, no, I don't need to take that or own it. And I will say that as a leader, you will make a lot of decisions that nobody gets to know the story behind because there's all sorts of circumstances. There are staffing transitions that I have to make that nobody gets to know the real story of what happened, and I have to take it. And what I will tell you is over and over again, leadership is taking it with grace and humility and being okay that nobody gets to know the full story. And that is hard, but that's where, for me, having a relationship with God where He knows the full story. I don't have to justify or explain or be like, well, if you only knew kind of thing. Taking the high road as a leader is the biggest leadership tip that I would give to someone is at
Yeah.
any opportunity you have, take the high road
Mm.
and be okay that nobody knows the full story. And it's not easy, certainly.
It's not. No, that's the thing that I keep thinking about is, yes, that is a beautiful vision of leadership that is actually really painful in real life, right? Like to take it, I'm just picturing like taking hits,
Hmm.
taking punches, like you get beat up as a
Hmm.
leader. I feel that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious as we seek to take the high road and those hits inevitably come, like what are some of the things that you've learned to do to recover? Um, Whether it's ways that you remember who you are, or even just ways that you care for yourself or allow yourself to be cared for so that you don't get beat up to, a bloody pulp to the point where you just can't continue leading anymore. Do you have any tips?
Yeah. I will say that not all the time, but sometimes I myself am one of those critics
Yeah.
that I have to protect myself from.
Mm-hmm.
I had an experience a couple weeks ago. I got invited to preach at a church and I bombed. It was probably the first time in my entire career where I walked off stage and I'm like sweating through my shirt. And I was like, I legitimately bombed. And I went home that night and I'm like laying in bed and I feel sick to my stomach and I'm rehearsing like I'm so embarrassed and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like shaming myself. You should have prepared more, all the things that
Yep.
I should have done.
Yep.
And because this is not the first time that I have had to walk through this, it took a minute and I took some breaths and I just felt this sense of you are not perfect. And this is a good reminder that none of this is about you. And I got up at night and I went out into my backyard and I stood in the grass and I literally like shook my body out because when I experience the shame or the like self-loathing, it's like I have to get out of my body in a way. And so animals, on the Sahara, if they're getting chased, they like have to shake out the adrenaline. And I literally
Yeah.
was in my backyard shaking out. I need to go for a run. I need to move. I need to sweat. I need to eat good food. And then I
Mm-hmm.
have really gotten good at being like, okay, that's shut. That's done. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
think about it anymore. And I'm kind of just giving myself the freedom to be like, okay, yeah, that wasn't perfect and that's okay. And we're moving
Yeah.
on and no harm done. Nobody got hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that it's fine. And so it's giving myself permission to not be perfect.
I love that. I mean, it's such a simple answer to give with words, but so difficult to practice over and over when you are leading and serving and speaking because you want to make a positive impact to show up in a way that feels like, "Oh, that didn't have the impact that I wanted." For me, that's one of my biggest wrestling points too, of like, am I allowed to be imperfect and still show up? And that is so painful. To survive that over and over and over again makes it easier and easier to show up as I am. But man, I love that physical, like releasing. I'm also thinking about like the people that you mentioned that are your closest people. Do you have people that you call that you're like, I bombed, like, I just need you to tell me who I am? Or like, is encouragement not something that is as meaningful for you as just having that kind of personal space to process?
Yeah, I am definitely not an encouragement kind of gal.
Hmm.
That's probably very low for me. I think
Hmm.
over the years as a leader, you learn to take the good feedback and the bad feedback and not pay
Uh-huh.
attention to any of them,
Uh-huh.
honestly. And
Uh-huh.
so I don't need hype people and I'm not saying that's what you're suggesting, but it's just not how I recalibrate. Mine is like an internal
Yeah.
recalibration and other people's input and feedback doesn't really help me
Yeah.
personally.
Interesting. I love the difference in different personalities too. That there's not
Totally.
one right or wrong way to
Nope.
lead or right or wrong personality type to be a leader. I'm curious if you have, as we're kind of getting to the end here, if there are women that are listening that have this sense of, man, I feel called to lead. I want to lead. I don't necessarily see opportunities, but I know there's something in me that God has put inside of me that I'm made to be a leader. And maybe they don't know what to do with that. Do you have any advice or wisdom to share with women who feel that sense of calling, but don't necessarily know how or where to walk it out?
So I would say two things. One, I think a lot of times our callings and our leadership start very, very small.
Yeah.
And I think we discount faithfulness and the small things that then
Mm.
grows into the big things. And I will tell you, throughout my life, it's been about humility and doing things. And I'm like, I would rather be doing what that person's doing than what's right here. And God's like, no, this small thing is the most important. It's
Mm.
like,
I love that.
God honors the small beginnings. And so
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times over 20 years I'm like, no, you're the person who takes the trash out right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're the
Mm-hmm.
person who is writing a blog who nobody is reading. Right. But you're getting the skills of writing that's
Mm-hmm.
going to serve you when you get to write articles in a magazine one day. And
Mm-hmm.
so just do what's in front of you. Do the work. Do the small things that you don't think matter that actually really, really matter. And the second thing I would say is to have more fun. And that's kind of like my life motto. But I think so many times as women, we are so hard on ourselves and we have so many expectations. I talk to so many women and it's like they're exhausted from doing so much. And they also feel like there's so much more they should be doing.
Mm.
And that's a crazy place to live in. And so I just think sometimes when we incorporate a little more fun into our lives, it frees us up to see other opportunities and potential and to not take ourselves so seriously and to actually recognize like, oh, there are new things that I wasn't even aware of because
Mm-hmm.
I've taken some pressure off myself.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. Start where you are. Don't be afraid of the small places that you're being invited to serve, to grow, to have your character shaped and formed through humility and have more fun.
That's
Yes,
right.
please. Let's do it. Mandy, this has been so fun. Before we wrap up, is there a permission slip that you would want to give to the women or men, the people listening?
Good question. This is true for men or women, but I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
say it in the context of women.
Mm-hmm.
Wear red lipstick. And I don't mean it in like you need to go out and like actually wear red lipstick, but it's like do something that makes you uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because it changes up your whole life in a weird way.
Uh-huh.
I've always been like a super natural girl and I'm like no makeup and only natural products. And a couple of weeks ago, I was watching the JFK and Carolyn Bessette love story,
Uh-huh.
obviously.
Clearly, why wouldn't you?
And so I was like, I have to wear red lipstick now because obviously. And I felt like a whole new woman. And I think sometimes we discount how one little change up and it's like, oh, I'm not a red lip kind of gal. Well, now I am a red lip kind of gal and I'm like a whole
Yeah,
new
you are.
person. So I think just like take a risk, do one
I
thing that
love
feels
that.
out of like my husband grew his hair out and now he looks like a ninja samurai and he's so hot. But like for 45 years, he would never have thought about growing his hair out and wearing a man bun every day. But it's like he's a whole new man. So
I
change
love
it up a
that.
little bit.
And that sounds fun too. Changing things up, taking
Yeah.
risks sounds like a great time. Mandy, this has been so fun. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for everything that you're doing to support women and moms internationally. It's a joy to learn from you.
So grateful for this time. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Permission Slips. I hope this conversation gives you permission to consider the hidden places where you might be making more of an impact than you have any idea, and to think about ways to make it awkward in order to stretch yourself and invite the people around you into greater connection. Remember, your life matters, and so do the places you're leading, visible or not, more than you know.